You're in the water loop.
Welcome to Waterloop, the podcast that explores solutions for sustainability and equity in water. I'm the host, Travis Loop. Milwaukee is tackling the challenge of urban stormwater management through an innovative, community-based public-private partnership. The Fresh Coast Protection Partnership is expanding green infrastructure, enhancing neighborhood quality, and developing the local workforce. In this episode, Bre Plier from the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewerage District and Kurt Farrell of CIS delve into the intricacies of scaling these efforts, benefits of collaboration, and impactful results seen so far, such as capturing millions of gallons of stormwater and revitalizing urban spaces. They also highlight the importance of designing with maintenance in mind, engaging community stakeholders, and fostering small, minority, and women-owned businesses. Before starting the conversation, a reminder that Waterloop is a nonprofit news outlet, so I want to thank this episode's sponsor, CIS. Waterloop. This episode is sponsored by CIS, a leader in community-based public-private partnerships that transform water infrastructure while making a meaningful impact on communities. With a focus on economic inclusion, multi-benefit solutions, and urban sustainability, CIS has overseen nearly $500 million in stormwater infrastructure projects across more than 50 municipalities. Their work doesn't just meet environmental and financial goals, it also opens doors for small, minority, and women-owned businesses, ensuring that local residents directly benefit from investments. CIS is truly grounded in partnership and focused on impact. Learn more at cisolutions.com. Waterloop. To get the public perspective on this community-based public-private partnership, I went to the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewerage District to talk to Bre Plier. Well, Bre, thanks for having me come out here to your headquarters. Could you talk about the need for, the opportunity for green infrastructure and similar types of approaches in Milwaukee?
Sure. So at the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewerage District, we've been doing green infrastructure for more than 20 years. This was something that we started doing, after we have what's called a deep tunnel that came online in 1994, and that drastically reduced the number of overflows that we would have every single year. But even so, we recognized that there were further steps that we could take to do more. And in 2010, our executive director and the leadership in this organization decided to put together what we called our 2035 vision. And by 2035, we want to get to zero overflows, zero basement backups, and zero homes in the 1% probability floodplain. And major strategies for us to be able to do that include things like green infrastructure. You can continuously build bigger and bigger pipes, but that's really expensive. And green infrastructure offers us a way to be able to capture stormwater where it's falling, and also adds other additional benefits like habitat. We see lots of birds and bees and butterflies out here. And it's also creates a really great sort of oasis in an urban area. So as we move forward with doing more and more green infrastructure, what we wanted to really focus on was trying to sort of hit that low-hanging fruit. So we were working with folks that were really interested in doing something like this on their properties. And we hit a lot of those people early on. And so then as we saw our numbers sort of ticking up with the amount of water we were able to manage in any given storm, we decided, well, if we're going to hit our goals by 2035, we have to exponentially increase the pace at which we are putting in green infrastructure in Milwaukee. For us, it's really important, we're here on the river. We have 3 main rivers that flow through our service area. They all feed out into Lake Michigan, which is our drinking water source. So it's really important to us not only to protect that water resource from an overflow standpoint, but also add things that are a water quality or habitat benefit.
What were or are the challenges to scaling up green infrastructure, kind of go in an exponential way to meet that 2035?
There have been many challenges, I would say. I think early adoption, particularly within the engineering community, I think was difficult. This isn't something that you get taught in engineering school, really. And so being able to kind of work through that, do some research to kind of show the performance value that green infrastructure has was really key and critical to us being able to do more green infrastructure. Funding is also another barrier that's always a tough challenge to overcome. But over time, what we started to do was we developed some programs where we would incentivize green infrastructure for private and other public property owners. And so what that means is that, we would help sort of pay that cost differential between traditional stormwater management and to the cost of green infrastructure, which may in some cases be slightly more expensive, but it offers a whole host of additional benefits. And that's when we started kind of seeing things take off a lot more. And this hasn't been a short process. Like I said, it's been about 20 years now that we've been really going after green infrastructure. But as it started to gain steam, not only here, but nationally, then there was just more conversations happening in this utility world about everyone trying to do their piece for this, which made things a lot easier. That made, more money available, especially from the federal level or the state level. And then we were able to work with our finance folks to be able to kind of help carve out some portions of our budget to be able to do projects like this.
Yeah, absolutely. So how did the opportunities and challenges lead you to this Fresh Coast Protection Partnership? And what is it?
So the Fresh Coast Protection Partnership is essentially, it's like a public-private partnership. We have hired a firm to help us scale up our ability to do this. We're a pretty small team internally that works on these projects. So it's almost like hiring out another arm of staff to help us find projects, target appropriate areas for green infrastructure, find willing landowners, put together the design teams, help us get the bids out for it, and then help also manage the construction and get these projects in the ground. And so it took a long time for us to get to this point. Public-private partnerships, I think, for the last 10 years have been more familiar in the energy world, but not necessarily in the wastewater or drinking water world. So this is starting to be something that's kind of taking off as a model, especially for other utilities like us, where usually the staff that do these kinds of things is very small. But now that there's more of a national recognition and there's more experience for that, I think that that's really helped. For us, we spent about 10 years looking at public-private partnerships, and we worked with a couple of different groups to kind of help us figure out how would we go about doing this? What are the types of structures we might use? And so then we ended up putting out a request for proposal in 2019 and ended up selecting a firm. So that was Corvius, or now CIS.
So you mentioned that these kind of partnerships are helpful because you have a small staff and there's so much to do. So it helps with that capacity. And does it help with the expediting of the work? Does it help to speed things up because you're, a government entity?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of benefits to having a public-private partnership. Private firms are able to be a little more nimble in areas where we may not be able to be. We have some unique scenarios in how performance-based payments happen, which is really important for us because that deals a lot with our risk sharing as a government agency. So we're very risk averse.
Sure.
And so that is something that we kind of look for in those types of partnerships. And we're able to pick up larger projects, but also be more involved in them than we traditionally have been in the past. Like I said, some of our other programs have really focused on us incentivizing partners by providing, funding to them. But this is really more of a hand-in-hand scenario where we work together in selecting projects and we work together in setting minimum design standards and being able to replicate project designs over time, which helps to save time and money and also gets projects in the ground faster.
Then, to get the private perspective on this partnership, I spoke with Kurt Farrell of CIS.
Well, community-based partnership allows us to transfer much of the risk away from MMSD as we fund and build, design, construct, and maintain these projects over the life of the project. And once the projects are complete, we turn in the gallons that are certified for the project, and then we're reimbursed by MMSD for the cost of the project.
And so why do they decide to form this partnership with you? And then what's the footprint of this particular effort look like?
So we're currently working with 19 municipalities that utilize MMSD as their water treatment facility. And the reason they wanted to work with us is that we can more effectively work with private organizations, private individuals, and then we can also work with a larger workforce. We can work with multiple developers, multiple designers. We also reach into the SWIMBY, or small minority women-owned and veteran businesses, and we help them build their business. And then we also like to work with emerging businesses, and currently working with an emerging business that has English as a second language. And we've brought in a mentor protege program as well, where we've got a mentor that has been in the business for 20 years, and then he's mentoring a smaller business that just got into the work within the last couple of years.
So as a private entity, you have so much more flexibility in contracting and hiring people and putting projects out than a public, entity is going to have, right? They've got a lot more restrictions.
Right. I think speed to market is one of the keys. And how fast or faster is our cycle time than a public entity that has to go out to bid for design, and then they bring back the design quotes, and they've got to go out to bid for construction, where we can go and have our own general contractor and designers already in place and be much quicker to get through the design process and build.
Talk about the way that the funding moves for this type of partnership. How does that work? Because that's one of the really innovative and useful aspects of it.
CIS hires all the designers, GCs, and other consultants that we use to put the project together. And we carry all those costs on our books until the project is completed. Once the project is completed, we have the project certified for the actual number of gallons that it will hold by a civil engineer. And then we're remunerated from or by MMSD based upon the gallon capture. And we get paid on a per gallon basis.
Yeah. And the workforce aspect, you mentioned that mentor protege piece. This is one of the really beneficial parts, I think, of these community-based P3s. Could you talk about that?
So community-based partnerships, as well as working with community-based businesses, is really a pillar of our business. And we've got a 25% quota for working with SWIMBY organizations currently. And we're currently looking at about a 46% overall SWIMBY utilization. So growing small businesses in the community to work on these projects is just a part of the way that we must do business to effectively integrate with the communities and with MMSD and our overall goals. To build on what Kurt said about workforce and community, I asked Bre about those topics.
One other element is on the economic side, workforce development, giving opportunities to businesses in the community. Could you talk about how you view that and why that's beneficial?
Well, workforce development is really important to MMSD. We've had programs dealing with workforce development for a very long time. Specifically with these programs, what we're looking for is a higher level of small women, minority business enterprise involvement. And so for the work that we've been doing in our public-private partnerships, we have a much higher goal for what we call SWIMBY than we, do necessarily as an organization as a whole. And what we're seeing with these programs is that really is driving the involvement of these small firms. And one of the things and how we're doing that is by working with some of these smaller firms to help them better work with government agencies like us. Government agencies tend to have a lot of paperwork, and sometimes our requirements might be confusing or difficult to meet. So part of what this program does is that it helps to sit them down, walk them through insurance requirements and bonding and all of that sort of stuff, helping them learn how to respond to a bid for a project with us, and taking the time to teach them. And the really nice thing about that is we've had several construction firms that are smaller minority-owned firms that have come back time after time to bid on some of these projects. So we're seeing that pan out in a really great way through this program.
And probably helps them build their own capacity to do other work and other projects.
Absolutely.
That's fantastic. Could you talk a little bit about just the state of what's been accomplished under this partnership so far? How many projects, gallons, and maybe some examples of some of the sites?
Sure. I think to date we have 10 completed projects. There's a few more that are currently in construction this summer. And so those should be hopefully complete by the end of this summer. By the end of the program in total, we'll have more than 11 million gallons being held every time it rains, which is fantastic. It's a huge win for capacity for us. Normally, to reach that amount, that would take us several years to get with smaller projects. Some of the really great projects that we've had to date have been in River Hills. This was a former farm field. It's being developed into a subdivision. It's 53 acres, but more than half of that 53 acres has been now preserved aside as a wetland. There were remnant wetlands there, but we expanded them. We added more vegetation. And so now that's going to get to be a community amenity with walking paths and trails. We've also done some other really great projects. We're currently working on Well Point Community Hub. That particular project, they serve an underserved population for healthcare needs and all those things. So they're revamping their campus, and they allowed us to come in and be a part of that to sort of add to their goals of having an outdoor healing space for the people that they serve. So just some really great projects like that we've gotten under our belt so far.
Yeah. One of the phrases used before public-private partnership is community-based. What does that mean to you and to MMSD?
Yeah, so community-based green infrastructure, so we consider them sort of one and the same. One really important element to any public-private partnership, but specifically why we call it community-based green infrastructure, is that we want the community to be involved. We have very specific types of target areas that we're looking to invest our funding and our green infrastructure projects in. And so being in a community-based environment, that means reaching out to the groups that are active within communities, the groups that are making projects happen, and then finding out from them how we can sort of connect with them and we can hitch our wagon to them and work together to get something that not only do we need by managing water where it falls, but also creating projects that offer some of these additional benefits. It could be something as simple as, we're taking water off of a public roadway, but putting it into a city park, but we will talk with community members about what kind of plants do you want to see here? What types of other amenities we might be able to help you find? We might be able to help find other funders to put in park benches or pergolas or things like that MMSD may not be able to pay for, but we can kind of help do that because we have a team of people available to seek those other things out.
Kurt Farrell from CIS was able to provide more information about the projects happening across Milwaukee communities.
Could you talk about some of these sites that we're going to see today? I'd love to hear about kind of each of these. The Well Point place that we're at right now to start.
Sure. The Well Point Care Network is about a 1.2 million gallon captured wetland with bioswale facility. It's located in the inner city at 88th and Capitol Drive, which is a really dense area typically, and it's hard to find parcels and owners that are willing to put an 11-year easement on their property so that we can build these type of facilities, which not only help the community, but MMSD and their capture of rainwater. We also have built numerous wetlands in River Hills and also in Franklin, Wisconsin. We've also just recently completed this summer a 600,000 gallon storm trap, which is an underground water containment system. It's called Bayside Mixed Use Facility. And that was for a major developer in the city here called Cobalt. And then we're going to see another facility today at Marquette, which is one of our bioswales that we worked with Marquette in. And then we also get into the permeable pavement projects at times. But that's pretty much the gamut of the projects we're typically working on.
Ann Leinfelder Grove of WellPoint Care Network explained why her organization is participating in the Fresh Coast Protection Partnership.
How did you get connected with the Fresh Coast Protection Partnership? And how does that fit into the direction that you're headed and the work that you do?
Right. So part of our current strategic vision is to utilize the rich resources we have of our campus, 18 acres and a very large facility, to see it less as a place where people come for services and more as a community convening location. So in addition to the work that we offer, we're opening our doors to other community organizations who may host their events here. A couple of them are using our space as their office space. We invite our neighbors in. Coming up in a few weeks, we'll have over 2,000 people come for a back-to-school picnic. So this campus and its ability to engage and welcome people is really how we connected with Fresh Coast. To do the renovations that we're in the midst of, so we're in our third of 4 phases of construction. It will become the longest renovation of all time. I'm exaggerating a little, but
it feels like it, right?
It feels like it, but incrementally taking what is a mid-century kind of institutional space and reimagining how it can be bright and open and welcoming, both inside where we're sitting, but also outside. So the notion that large asphalt slabs for parking or playground is modern or appropriate, that's not relevant anymore. So we engaged with landscape architects and other experts who helped us understand that the changes we'll make outside on our campus need to be in keeping with modern standards, and then introducing us to how important our 18-acre campus might be to creating a large green stormwater infrastructure project. In fact, we understand it's the largest one that MMSD has had. So thinking about those things in your mind and then seeing it on the ground are two very different things. It's really upended our play fields and our front lawn, and we see the vision, and we're in the midst of watching it come to fruition.
Could you share more about that vision, what this will look like when it's not a construction zone anymore and it's a finished place?
Well, we'll have several biobasins where stormwater will be collected, absorbed, and then distributed. They won't be ponds. They'll be biobasins that drain, and they'll be planted with beautiful native grasses and plants, so flowering and in the season in Wisconsin, just very bright and welcoming. A good accompanying project for that is that we have envisioned recreational walking paths as being part of our campus plan. And so those will be built right alongside the biobasins to observe and enjoy the beauty that will happen. And then in the end, we'll have new parking lots that are smaller, that include plantings, that include trees, that include parking islands, way less severe and way more environmentally friendly.
Sri Vedichalam of CIS explained to me how the Fresh Coast Protection Partnership is addressing the fact that Milwaukee, like many other cities, has a history of projects that didn't occur in communities of color or develop a local workforce.
Milwaukee is a diverse community. It is also one of the most segregated communities in the country. It has a checkered history, and so if you talk to Black communities and Latino communities in the city, they will say that projects happen in our backyard, in our neighborhood. We don't even know about it. I've talked to community leaders, and they say we were not consulted. We were not part of this discussion, and we didn't know this was going to happen. And what we need to see are not programs in schools talking about future job prospects, saying, let's teach K through 12 students about all the careers that are out there. Here's what environmental jobs could be. We want to know what jobs exist right now in our community for our youth and our young adult population right now. So that's the value of bringing this framework into a practical, showing it in a practical way. And the model that was set up in Clean Water Partnership is simple in some ways. It is very, very simple. It basically says, you keep the dollars in the community and you utilize the workforce that already exists here. And if it doesn't exist, then make sure, train and bring it up to speed and make sure that happens. So that model has now been adopted in places like Milwaukee with the Fresh Coast Protection Partnership, leading the way in showing what you can do in protecting the Great Lakes with local workforce, with local businesses and contractors.
Next, I went to Marquette University to see a bioswale and speak with Brian Simon of Simon Landscape Company about working on green infrastructure and mentoring Eladio Becerra, for who English is a second language.
So talk to me about working with Eladio and kind of getting him involved in this partnership.
So Eladio was an employee of mine. We worked together for a company prior to that. I've known him for 30 years. And he's been a great employee, trustworthy, honest, hardworking guy, and he's very experienced with equipment, skid steers, all types of backhoes or whatever. He's done construction for many years. He left my company to go out on his own about 7 years ago, and has been doing a lot of maintenance, bioswale maintenance, private landscaping jobs. And we've kept in touch. He's done some work for me over those years as well. And I think he's a great person to carry on the torch for the green infrastructure maintenance and work in the city.
So how has that happened? How has he personally and his business kind of been brought into the partnership?
So it's been hard as a contractor in the city, to bid on City of Milwaukee projects or state projects, the construction side of it, you have to have a track record. And it's, sometimes it's hard to break into those networks. Obviously low bid wins the work, but they're going to look at the reputation and past projects and see what you've done. So as a contractor starting out, trying to get him to the next level from doing job to job to where he can manage several crews or get in onto bigger projects and work. So Lyle, we talked, like I said, we've been doing work for each other. He's been doing projects for me for the last several years. And when I met Kurt or CIS, their green infrastructure maintenance program, I thought Eladio was the perfect person and company to take over that. I have, pretty vast knowledge as far as construction of green infrastructure, bioswales and maintenance and identifying the plants. And what I noticed was a lack of knowledge in the maintenance side of it. They would construct the green infrastructure, but then there are not a lot of people that know how to properly identify and maintain the assets once they've been constructed. And so I've been working with Lyle to try to teach him some of the different plants and how to go at it. And so CIS has several projects throughout the greater Milwaukee area, part of the FCC program. And for the last 2 or 3 years, I guess, they've been building them. One of the big problems with prairies and green infrastructure is everybody sees a mature prairie and says, that's what I want. And when they plant it, they have to battle the weeds. It's a 3 to 5 year process to get those prairies looking like they're supposed to, from cutting and herbicide and pulling and weeding. And, so that's where we are right now. We've been, CIS helped Lyle establish the certifications that he needs, and we're moving forward. He's learning.
Lastly, I asked Bre about advice she would have for other communities trying to follow in Milwaukee's footsteps.
Any lessons learned or advice you would give to other communities that might be looking to do a partnership like this?
I think designing with maintenance in mind is always like the biggest, most important piece of that. We've tried to do that in most scenarios that we've done. But keeping maintenance in mind is really important because this look may not be for everyone, but all green infrastructure doesn't have to necessarily be like this. So I think designing with maintenance in mind and aesthetics, that of what is acceptable to the landowner or the surrounding community, that's always really important. And I think too, having a true partnership with a public entity really means like sharing that information back and forth, and having, open and honest conversations with each other about how things are going, know what you really want before you enter into it. So, we set up some pretty stringent goals up front and then had some sort of targets of areas where we wanted projects to meet more than one benefit for us. And so trying to maximize what you're getting out of it in that sense.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Great information. Exciting to see what's happening here in Milwaukee.
Great. Thanks for having us.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. And thank you to this episode's sponsor, CIS. Learn more about them at cisolutions.com.
You're in the water loop.